Okay, dual credit U.S. history students. I took the time to post some review videos for the long-time 1776 book that I've been using for summer reading to help students out, and realized that meant that I was going to have to do so for the optional book that I gave you, 10 Days That Unexpectedly Changed America. Of course, things show up in reverse on a computer video here, and you can also look at the corner of my book and see that my dog Buddy has tried to do a little bit of summer reading, as he's kind of gnawed on this one pretty good. But I'm going to do an episode of review on each of the chapters, each of the 10 chapters in the book, to kind of help you out as you prepare for your summer reading test that will be coming up. So let me just jump right into the first chapter that you read. It was entitled Massacre at Mystic. And just to give you an overview of the main point of that chapter, and then to hit the highlights of it. That first essay, Massacre at Mystic, challenges the reader to reconcile the tragic irony of American history, a nation founded on very high ideals, but was also built, as you find out in this chapter, on the slaughter and destruction of epic proportions of the Native American population. This brutal Puritan victory on the Mystic River against the Pequot Indians of New England set a pattern for European and Indian relations for the next 2 centuries. It became kind of the type or the model of what was going to happen in years to follow. There wouldn't be any assimilation with the Native American or the Indian culture. It would basically be a process of moving them out and conquering them. The chapter ends in terms of kind of giving you this quick overview by highlighting another aspect of American history, and that is kind of this redemptive quality, our ability to adapt and change, because just recently, in the past 15 or 20 years, the Pequot Indians of Connecticut have been given a huge tract of land and have been able to build a casino and restaurants on it and make a lot of money. That's a quick, just kind of a thumbnail sketch, but let me take you through the details of the chapter itself. The first thing that chapter does, and you're going to find this out as you read through this book. Hopefully you've already read through this book. This is just to help you out, not to take the place of reading it. Is it's going to begin with the event itself. Then it's going to give you some background of the event, what it led to, and then kind of put it in perspective or wrap it up. The event itself, the massacre of the Pequot Indians, happened on May 26, 1637. The Puritan army of New England was led by John Mason and a John Underhill. Just 100 or so New England troops, but they had quite an army at their disposal as they were going to attack the Pequot Indians. Of other Indians, the Mohegans and the Narragansett Indians were with them. The first part of that chapter in great detail lays out just the massacre of these Pequot Indian villages, the death that took place, men, women, and children, the burning of the village. Pretty rough stuff there as it gives a description of that. And then that first section ends by talking about the Puritans' response to that, is they simply viewed it as God's will and gave God the glory for it. They believed that what they were doing was conquering territory that God wanted them to. The Indians they viewed as pagan, non-Christian, and they more or less had the right, they thought, to do that. So that's the massacre at Mystic. And then it goes in again, after, like I told you, after mentioning the event, it'll give the background of it. So it backs up and says, okay, why did this massacre have to happen, or what led to it? 1620, you have European settlers, largely Puritans, that begin to arrive in New England. Before long, thousands and thousands of them have arrived. The story kind of tells itself as you think about it, as the New England white settlement begins to spread. They encroach on Indian territory. Attempts are made to Christianize the Indians. These praying towns are set up, but any Indians that resisted were going to face trouble. Disease was a major problem that these Indians faced. They had no resistance at all to European diseases, to smallpox, for example, and wiped them out. Some historians have speculated somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the Native American population would have been wiped out by disease. So when you think about the Europeans conquering the Native Americans, not microbes, not muskets, not guns, but microbes. So microbes, not muskets there. It also details, after it talks about the rise of the Puritans and the growth of the Puritan settlement, that they also encroached on the Indians' economy. The Indians traded wampum, which were seashells that they drilled holes in and made necklaces. They used that as a type of money or exchange, and the white settlers began to do that at a much more rapid rate, and that led to trouble. Then what the chapter does is it picks up from there and says, okay, the events that happened to New England set the pattern for what was going to happen in U.S. history for the next 200 years, and it gives a couple of highlights. It jumps ahead gives you a couple of examples, jumps ahead to 1675 and 1676 in an event known as King Philip's War. Is described. King Philip, or Metacom, which was his actually Indian name, was the son of Massasoit, the Indian that befriends the New England settlers. The first Thanksgiving, they don't survive without him. Shows you how quick that the relationship deteriorated. Massasoit's son, Metacom, that the Europeans called King Philip, forms a confederation. He believed that he had to unite tribes to drive back the Europeans, or it was going to be too late. He has some initial success, but he ends up losing. King Philip's War is won by the New England settlers. Metacom, or King Philip himself, is captured. They sever his body into 4 pieces, cut off his head, place it outside one of the major cities as a sign of what would happen to European resistance. Then the clock rolls forward just a little bit as you see this pattern just continuing throughout U.S. history. Jump ahead to the 1830s. You have 7th President of the United States, Andrew Jackson, who has Congress pass the Indian Removal Act, which leads to the Trail of Tears, which perhaps you've heard about. The Indians of our area of the country, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Seminole Indians, are forced west to Oklahoma. They were supposed to have that land as long as the sun shined, but of course when you have American settlement moving west, future Indian tribes are going to be driven further and further west, and you have the Indian Wars after the American Civil War, and the Indian population is either put on reservations or for the most part wiped out. So what happened at Mystic back in 1637 just set the stage for what was going to take place later throughout history. Then the chapter kind of tries to end on a positive note. I personally don't buy it completely, but it kind of makes the argument, maybe as you think about what's happened in the past 15 or 20 years, maybe the Pequots actually won this war, because today surviving Pequots in Connecticut have been given a large tract of land, I think about 1,500 acres or so. They're able to build casinos, which is kind of funny that this is an old Puritan territory. They would have hated gambling. But casinos, hotels, and in 2004, the surviving Pequots of today made about $1.3 billion. But I don't buy it. You think about the wiping out of those Indians back in 1637. I don't think they would have taken the deal. Look, we're going to wipe out most of y'all, but 300 years later, we're going to give you a little bit of land back and you can make some money, but most of y'all are going to die. So I don't buy the argument that the Pequots ultimately won the war 15 or 20 years ago. That's chapter 1, the massacre at Mystic. So future episodes will be upcoming. Hope it helps.